Hi friends, welcome back to Heart Treasure, and I'm so glad that you've all come to join me again. It's been a long time going through lockdown, but I have been busy doing a lot of writing and putting content into my blog, so why don't you go and look at www.hearttreasure.net, see what I've been up to. In the meantime, let's move on to the next episode in our series, How to Build Biblical Friendships, and this is how to deal with conflict in a friendship. Conflict can be more than just a disagreement and can be built up over a period of time. But generally what happens is one person perceives a threat, and in order to avoid pain or to act out of fear, conflict happens in a relationship. When we try and resolve conflict in a friendship, our ultimate goal is to preserve the friendship but deal with the pain. When we have really strong negative emotions and we allow them to fester inside of us, they build up into what the Bible describes as a bitter root. Hebrews 12 verse 15 is very clear. Do not allow a bitter root to grow up inside of you and cause trouble, because by it many are defiled. A bitter root will eventually cause trouble in your relationships, and if you don't address it, it can destroy more than just a friendship. You see, a root of bitterness will eventually bring about a harvest of pain. So we don't want this root of bitterness to grow inside of our hearts, because a root of bitterness has companion emotions that go along with it. One of these, for example, is wrath, which is extreme anger that bubbles inside of you and then you can't control it. Another one is just low-grade anger, frustration at not getting what you want, what the Bible also refers to as clamor. Another one is slander, when we go about talking about the person that is hurting us or destroying their reputation as we go about it. And another thing is malice, when you go out of your way to hurt that person in some way. Ephesians chapter 4 verse 31 is very clear. Get rid of all bitterness, anger, clamor, slander, and especially put malice away from you. So the Bible is very clear that these companions of a bitter root are very dangerous in our relationships and our unity with people in relationships. So whatever we do, we should not delay addressing conflict in a relationship and try and work towards reconciliation as much as possible. In Matthew 5 verse 23 to 25, Jesus makes it very clear that if you have something against your brother, first go and be reconciled to your brother and sister before you come to the Lord in worship. In other words, for the Lord, it is more important that we be reconciled and at peace with one another than we come to Him with worship and have something against our brother and sister. Which is why in Ephesians 4 verse 26, the Bible is very clear. Don't let the sun go down on your anger. So now I'm sure you want to know how to deal with conflict. Here is the first and most important rule. Keep your mouth shut until you have prayed about it. And with that, there are three things that you're going to pray about. First thing is to ask God if this is something that you should talk about. Secondly, you're going to clarify with God what are your attitudes and your emotions behind your desire to deal with the conflict. And then you're going to ask God to give you a respectful and loving attitude. Let's go back to the first one. Sometimes we just have to pray and ask God if we should really talk about it. And it really gives you one of two options. You can keep quiet or you can address it. First one, quiet. Sometimes it's just best not to talk about things that are bothering you. For example, in Proverbs 10 verse 12, it says that hatred stirs up dissension amongst friends, but love covers a multitude of sins. And sometimes it's just loving not to talk about the things that are bothering you. But then there's also a situation in Proverbs 12 verse 16 where it says, a fool shows his annoyance at once, but a prudent person overlooks an insult. So there are some things that you just have to say, Lord, is this really something that needs to be talked about, or can I just keep quiet about it? Pray about it first. And there may be a number of motives and attitudes that are influencing our desire to address a conflict. So if that is the case, we need to ask God to show us what those are. For example, is it my problem or is it really their problem? Do I have a share in the problem? Do I bring it on? The next question would be, If I had to bring this conflict in, would it be loving and respectful towards them? Is it possible to give grace, to turn the other cheek, to forgive them? I have to ask what their headspace is like, or what my headspace is like. How important is this issue, and how important is it to God? And am I being a nag, or emotionally demanding, or perhaps even unfairly critical on this person? So you have to consider what your motives and attitudes behind it are before you put your mouth into gear. He says, take the plank out of your own eye. Once the plank is out, then you can see more clearly how to take the splinter out of your brother's eye. In other words, take a good look at yourself first, because only when you've humbled yourself and looked at yourself honestly can you then go and help a brother or a sister deal with what is wrong in their lives. It is important that we have that humility before we go and confront stuff in our relationships. So here, you're going to have to spend some time really thinking about what it is that is really bothering you and what the real issue is under all the emotions that you are feeling. It helps always to start off positive. But what I find really helps is sometimes just to write it all down, because by committing it to paper, you can clearly see what it actually is that's bothering you by phrases or thoughts that keep repeating themselves. And that's a good way to clarify in your mind what the issue really is. When you're going to go talk, make sure that you choose a private place. Don't do it in public. Choose a private place where it's just the two of you face to face. In Matthew 18 verse 15, it says, go show your brother his fault just between the two of you. So if you're going to have to deal with a conflict with a friend, don't have an audience. Just be the two of you. Choose a good time to talk. Choose a good place to talk, and don't spring it on them. Another thing that you can do, especially if both of you are believers, is to start the whole conversation by praying together first. Because remember, ultimately, the goal is to make the friendship stronger, not weaker. So now, we finally got to the situation where you're going to talk about it. You've prayed about it. You've created a safe environment for the two of you to talk it out. Now the actual talking starts. Start with a compliment. You're a good friend. I really value our friendship. Affirm the person and who they are. Start off good, strong, and positive. Then you can move on to gently and directly start making your point. And you just don't dive into it and saying, you did this and you do that. But you say, I'm feeling tense about something and I'd like to talk about it. Or there is something that's really bothering me and I would really like to talk about it. So you gently and in an easy way introduce the topic. And then you express your feelings. You say, I feel like this. Not you make me feel like this and you do this, but I feel like this, and you, whatever you do, you make sure you don't attack the person in your conversation. Make sure in the process that you admit that you could be wrong, and ask if you've offended them in any way or wronged them in any way. And also make sure that if you have fault and you've made a mistake in that situation, that you admit it and ask for a forgiveness. All of that is just the process of having a good conversation. But here are a few tips while you're having that conversation. So firstly, when you speak, determine within yourself that you're going to be loving, caring, and gentle to your friend. And speak to them as a friend, not as an enemy. In Proverbs 16:24 it says, pleasant words are like a honeycomb to the soul, sweet and healing to the bones. So in other words, you want your conversation and your words to be building up rather than breaking down. Important to listen. There's no good just speaking all the time, but not pausing to listen what their side of the story is. Be careful in your listening to make sure that you're listening very carefully. There is your reality, there is that person's reality, and there's a reality of the world around you. There are multiple realities playing out in the situation. So seek to have a mutual understanding of what is actually going on rather than just stating your case. Also make sure that you're looking at possible solutions for the two of you, and possible solutions that will take you guys to a stronger position in the future rather than a negative position. And you know what? Sometimes it's important to say sorry. It's important to the person who needs to hear you say those words, even though it's not a prerequisite to their forgiveness. Saying sorry is important. And if you find that you are getting anger, sometimes it's better just to give yourself a bit of a time out and just take a breather for 5 minutes before you come back together again. But whatever happens in your talking, make sure you stay on the subject and do not pull out old stuff that is ancient history to rehash and work through again. Stay on the subject. Finally, end the conversation well. Perhaps sometimes in dealing with our conflict, we just have to agree to disagree. People are allowed to have different opinions and values to you, but still uphold the friendship. As you are working at resolving the conflict between the two of you, make a point at the end of a conversation of reminding them how precious they are to you and how much you value the conversation. It may be that the two of you might have to talk about the topic on multiple occasions because you have such differing point of views, but have a strategy together that will build into the friendship rather than break it down, reaffirming all the time that the friendship is so important and that you love each other. Just a word on forgiveness at the end of a conflict. When you say you forgive someone, you're basically promising that you won't bring this up again in the future or use it against them in any way. You're also promising that you're not going to dwell on this in your heart and mind and continue just to relive it in your heart and mind all the time. You're also not going to talk to other people about it and hash it out with other people. And finally, you're not going to let that stand between the two of you and impact the relationship in the future. It's important when we say forgiveness and we move on from conflict that it's finished with and dealt with once and for all. Friendships take a lot of energy and they're worth taking care of and maintaining and not allowing things to sit between you or cloud your hearts or cloud your minds so that bitterness grows inside of you. Friendships that last for years will have conflict and you will have to talk things out, but it is definitely worth dealing with these little niggles that sit in our hearts. So that is really the end of today's chapter. Thank you for joining me today. I hope you benefited from the work we did today. Trust that you will come and visit us on the blog at www.hearttreasure.net. Let me know how you feel about this content by leaving a comment, liking this video, and if you'd like to, please subscribe so that you won't miss out future chapters on this lesson on how to build biblical friendships. Hope to see you again soon. Love you lots. Bye.